What's up? You're listening to The Long Game, and I'm your host, David Lee Kim, co-founder of Omniscient Digital. In this episode, we chat with Kash Miah. Kash is the VP of Marketing at CrowdRiff. CrowdRiff is an all-in-one visual marketing platform that empowers destination marketers to source, share, and scale original content that connects with today's travelers. Before CrowdRiff, Kash served in marketing leadership roles at GoHenry, Sermo, Shutterstock, and Fiverr. In this conversation, we talk about Kash's approach to joining new companies in new industries as a marketing leader and how he gets a lay of the land, builds relationships, and determines priorities. We spent some time on the idea of building community around brands and his experience building a community at Fiverr and what it looks like for B2B brands to build communities today. We end the conversation getting a bit personal about how he manages a demanding job with being a parent and his background as an immigrant and his upbringing. I think you're going to enjoy this one. Here's my conversation with Kash Miah. Kash, welcome to The Long Game.
Thanks for having me, David. It's been a while.
Yeah, I'm excited for a chat. I got to do a lot of research on you and prepare and got to learn a lot about you that I had no clue about. So I'm excited to jump in. So you're currently VP of Marketing at CrowdRiff. Maybe just quick rundown of your past experience. So you were also VP of Brand Marketing at GoHenry, VP of Community at Sermo, Director of Social and Content at Shutterstock and at Fiverr before that. In my opinion, those are all very different types of companies, different industries. Looking back, how do you connect the dots that led you to CrowdRiff?
Yeah, I think so in each one of those roles, there's been a through line. And if you look at Fiverr to Shutterstock to Sermo, and to a certain degree at GoHenry, they're all some sort of marketplace. There's dual sides to it. So there's not just a consumer and a brand, there's a community around it. So Fiverr, there's a freelance marketplace. Shutterstock, it's a photography stock marketplace. Sermo is the same idea. It's like physicians come onto the platform, they're talking, and we sort of connect them with big pharma companies to be able to do research, right? And all of them have that through line. So it makes it a little bit easier when I jump from industries because something at the baseline is still the same. It's marketplaces, and I absolutely love marketplaces because you get a chance to work with two sides of that marketplace, and you learn a lot about each one of them and what do they need, what do they want, and my job is to bring it all together and be able to either grow the business or grow the community in a way that helps drive revenue.
Yeah, the fact that you've kind of specialized, I'd say, in marketplaces is fascinating because you're not just marketing to one audience, you got to get two different audiences with different incentives, convinced to use your product. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, sometimes, I've been very fortunate in utilizing one side of that marketplace to help the other. And so the Fiverr one's a good example where we identified that sellers can actually bring buyers, and the way the product was designed was around that concept. So unlocking certain levels gives you a chance to earn more potential. So within that sort of mechanism, you say, bring in friends and family in. Shutterstock, kind of the same idea, right? We have gaps that photographers need to fill. You go to them and they sort of fill those gaps. And so you can use one side of the marketplace to inform and drive growth for the other. It doesn't always work that way, but in these roles I've been very fortunate to find there's a demand for it. We go on and find people who can fill that demand.
Yeah. What's interesting to me about your past roles is you've been in multiple leadership roles at these different companies in different industries, and it's always been really interesting to me to hear from other marketing leaders how they decide to onboard themselves when entering a new company, right? As an individual contributor, you're onboarding to the function. It's pretty straightforward, but as the functional leader, you kind of need to get a grasp of not just the whole department, but the whole company and how it's performing and who your peers are in the leadership team. I assume at this point you have some high-level game plan for entering a company in a new industry as a marketing leader. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a quick story that actually helped me get better at this. So typically people come onto a company, they don't really spend time talking to who they'd be working with, who might be their peers or counterparts. It's usually you come in, you spend 30 days just getting to know the business and the people. So when I was at Shutterstock, there was a CMO there who he and I built a really good relationship. And one of the things that he consistently reminded me is that not everyone knows what you do, and not everyone else can do what you do. So the best thing to do is like get ahead of it. So spend time with them before you're about to go into a meeting. Spend time with them before you meet them. Do some research. Like understand who they are. So when you first meet them, you get away with the awkwardness, but also like you can have compelling conversations and figure out whether or not they are the person that's going to help you do what you need to do best. And so since then, every role I've been at, I've proactively asked the hiring manager to give me a list of people that either I'm going to be working with really closely or the folks on my team. And then I go out and spend time researching who they are, just very similar to like what you've done with your podcast guests, right? You kind of like look up who they are, what they've done in the past. I do the same thing. So when I go into these meetings, there's something for me to talk about. And so there's a relationship already being built ahead of me coming into that company. And I think it also sets the right foundation with the other person. They go in knowing that I'm willing to spend the time with them. That it's not just going to be like a conversation where we spend 30 minutes like shooting the shit. It's productive. They get to know me, I get to know them. So that's been super helpful for every single one of my roles. It's been super helpful here because at CrowdRiff, I'm the only employee in the US. It's a Canadian company. We are a remote first company, so there are a lot of folks that are remote, but I'm the only person that's not physically within proximity of the office. So for me, it was really important to spend that time doing research on who my own team is, but also who I'd be working with closely over the next few years. And so when I went to visit, I was like, I knew who they were, I knew what they did, and the time we spent was much more valuable than like, tell me about yourself.
Yeah, I love that, and it's kind of related to the advice I give kind of younger marketers, where I tell them, hey, I know you have your job, but the way you grow is speaking to other functions and learning how to collaborate with them, and not just communicating what you do, but why it's important, why it should be important to them, and why they should work with you on more projects. And so it's kind of like this next level of communication. As you get more responsibility, you need to change how you talk about not just what you do, but your role and the team that you're on as well.
Yeah, I think the idea around communication is something that, it's this one area that I've always struggled with in terms of finding the right way to communicate across different teams. And what I mean by that is like I can communicate to my team very well in terms of what we need to get done and how it ladders up to, let's say, business goals or company goals. Sometimes when I'm so focused on that, I miss the parallel part of it, which is like I also need to communicate what's happening to the business to the rest of the leadership team. So there's always like this push and pull with that, and I'm still working through some of it. But what I found is that the ability to just like bring in as many people into the fold. So to your point, having those conversations with the people who can actually help me do my job well and deliver early on allows me to bring them into situations where I don't have to relay information. They're kind of part of that discussion already, and it makes it easier to communicate with them. So we don't have those like missing steps. I'm figuring out more and more in sort of like a leadership capacity, that is the best way to get stuff done faster. It sounds like pretty straightforward. Like anyone to be like, hey, bring in more people. But we also have to like understand we're in this age where time is valuable. People are busy, they're remote. And so you don't get that face-to-face dialogue to say like, hey, you have 5 minutes to talk about this, or let's go grab a coffee and talk through something. Like that reality is a bit different. And so still being able to bring in leaders who understand like, hey, what I'm doing for this person will impact my side of the job as well. So that's been like something like really reassuring and also eye-opening. It's like, let's bring in the right people, have the right conversations, so I don't have to keep relaying information to other people.
Yeah, there's so many layers to it. I remember when I was a product manager at HubSpot, I was working across, for a single project, like 8 different product teams. And when I was head of growth at People AI, I was like super cross-functional as well, like sales, customer success, and so on. And I used to joke that my job was building slide decks. And you can laugh about it, but it became like an actual tool so that I didn't have to repeat myself. Right. If someone didn't have time for a meeting, I'd share the deck with them and they'd say, actually, let's jump on a call. Like it became a tool to not just facilitate meetings, but also help people see the importance in their own time if they made time to review it. So that's one of the key things that I think it's overlooked, that ability to just communicate your ideas clearly and also like build those partnerships, not just as a leader, but an IC as well.
Yeah, it sounds like you're kind of like ahead of the curve with how remote work is today, right? I mean, Loom and all these like tools are making it easier to be able to do exactly that. Communicate and share information in a very clear way, so that whoever's on the other end of it can do it at their own pace and time. But you've been ahead of it for quite some time, so I'm sure like as the rest of the world catches up.
I had to learn the hard way because at HubSpot we were remote. Like there was still an in-office culture, but VPs would be remote, right? And if I wanted time with a VP, I couldn't just put time on a calendar. I had to send them a Loom video and walk through stuff, and they'd be like, "Yep, this sounds good," or whatever. And different time zones. I worked with a team in Dublin, so 5-6 hours ahead, right? So I want to jump back to this idea of changing industries, right? You've marketed to, the list I have is physicians, families and their kids, DMOs like museums, marketplace buyers and sellers. So I'll give you 2 questions. You can decide which one you want to answer or answer both. But which audience has been the most challenging and or the most fun to market to?
I can answer both. I'll start with the challenges. So the most challenging was actually parents, like kids and parents, and for a couple of reasons. I know it sounds pretty like straightforward, right? Like there's a very particular need, and we're trying to fill a need, right? The next answer would have been physicians, but they're a little bit easier to acquire because there's only a handful of physicians who would join a solution like CrowdRiff, Sermo, right? With parents, though, you've got so many different layers. There's like a level of trust. Like, is this solution actually going to help? Like, do I trust this company with all my financial data, with my kid's name? There's a whole level of trust there. Also, these tools are designed to help kids understand financial literacy and how to like prepare them for the future. But not every parent is equipped to do that yet. In many cases, what we found is like most parents don't even know how to manage their own finances, let alone getting ahead of it with their own kids. So you're like trying to break those barriers down before you can even introduce a product in front of them, right? So we spent so much time just trying to understand the psyche of the parent and breaking them down into segments before we can even say like, you need this product for these reasons. So that's why it was like really challenging. Plus it's a direct-to-consumer product. So you're looking at, even though it's a subscription business, you're looking at thousands and thousands of customers on a monthly basis just to get it to break even. Whereas like a healthcare solution, like you bring in a couple of physicians, like it's gold. They'll be with the product for forever, and you're just mining it constantly. So they're almost like a SaaS solution versus a direct-to-consumer solution. So that was definitely the most challenging. And this thing for me in my role was, because I was so focused on brand building, it was to be able to communicate why a parent should consider us in the sort of most abstract ways possible, instead of sending them a Facebook ad, right? It's like all these other things to build trust, to let them know that we are the right solution for them. The most fun I had in sort of these roles was at Fiverr, and part of it was, and I talk about this often, so part of it was I was there pretty early on. I was like the first U.S. marketing hire. It was a tiny office. It was myself and like 2 other people in like literally like a corner room. We had no idea, how big it would turn into, but we believed in the idea that freelancing is going to change. And what I was specifically working on at the time was spending a lot of time with community, with the sellers who were coming onto the platform. Why did they join? What makes them think that their skills were valuable? And the more time I spend with them, I realized like this sort of like direction for the business is going to be amazing, just because these sellers weren't there to make it their full-time job. They were doing it on the side. And when you start to look at the trends around like side businesses and making money on the side, all of a sudden you find people who hate their daytime job, want to do something fun in the evening, and it turns into something that's going to pay them. And so I spent a lot of time talking to the community. I traveled a lot. We actually formalized and productized a community event where in the beginning it was us, managing those events. So imagine talking to users in London, which we did, San Francisco, LA. Eventually it's like, this is really expensive. We can't do it ourselves. So how do we make this into an actual product? And luckily we found ambassadors in each one of these locations who were like, I'll do it, and raise their hand. And so we put in these like very strict guidelines in terms of how they engage with the brand, what they do at these events. And we found that these freelancers, they're trying to build their business on top of our product, and they're willing to go above and beyond. And now you've got 60 to 70 events around the world run by ambassadors who are not paid in like the traditional sense, right? They still get promoted, and they got badges on their profiles. Like, people knew who they were in terms of their relationship to the business, but they weren't getting like a cash incentive. And that to me was like the most exciting part. It's like people are willing to build their business and do all this like self-promotion. So that was the most fun I had, like over the 2 years. Like I traveled a lot. I met so many amazing people, and some of them I'm still like Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn friends with, and we communicate all the time. Like, I know them personally, yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
It's awesome, like seeing how much they've grown on the platform, and some have left and started their own business. But those relationships at that early stage, that was like the most fun I ever had in any of my roles.
I had no clue that Fiverr was hosting events like that locally. That's such a cool effort. Yeah, and
it's like we do events now at CrowdRiff, and I see like how much time and energy it takes to just do one. At the time, it was just like a bunch of people getting together. It's like, hey, we'll have 250 people. I remember one year we went to WeWork, and we're like, hey, we can't really afford like an actual bar space. Can we just use your front entrance? And we'll bring in the drinks, we'll do all of that. And they didn't even blink an eye. They're like, yeah, sure, just sign this release form, do it.
Yeah.
So we brought in 250 people into WeWork downtown. We brought in food and drinks. And so like we were also looking at like scrappy, cost-effective ways to do it, even though it was still expensive. Nowadays, like running a conference or an event is ridiculous, But back then, it's like, how can we do it fast and easy so that we get as many people to come and sort of hear the gospel of what we're trying to get across?
Yeah. Wait, you just use the WeWork lobby instead of the actual WeWork?
Well, they some of the WeWork, especially there was one downtown. I forget the exact address, but closer to the west side, where their main entrance was like almost like a garage door, and it was massive. And so you just opened the front entrance, and it was just like empty space, and they didn't really use it. And so when we scouted like locations, I kind of just like reached out. I was like, hey, would you guys be interested in giving us the space? What was funny about that event, we had loud music. We had, I want to say like 200 to 250 people. And you could see in the background in some of the videos, like there are companies actually doing work, and they're behind the glass doors. But they didn't mind, and so it was a good way to think about like, how can we be scrappy as a business to do these types of events? Because ultimately, like with Fiverr, the community is at the heart of everything. And if you see it even today, the way they market, the way they think about the business across their website, it's all around the actual community. The community is at the heart of everything they do. It's transitioning as they get bigger and bigger, but it's still there, and it hasn't gone away.
Yeah. I want to focus a bit more on that concept of community and the way you speak about it, and it all makes sense to me. Like that is what comes to mind when I think of community, like going to events, meeting people, and learning from them. It feels like this concept of community has kind of just gotten used as like a much more broader term now. Like it might mean Slack groups or Facebook communities or whatever. So I'd love to hear from you, like two sides of this, maybe understanding a bit more about how you built community back then, like Fiverr is one example, and what does it look like for a B2B brand to build community now? Maybe can you start like what the hell is community?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the idea of what a community is has changed from sort of like in-person, face-to-face opportunities to, on social, Instagram communities, Facebook communities. Like there's Facebook groups for that type of stuff too. I actually, funny enough, like a couple of years ago, I was talking to a founder who started like a fitness product. Like it's a solution for a lot of fitness folks who wanted to kind of do their own thing, and they don't know how to get started when they want to charge someone. Like, so she started this really cool business, and she and I had this like really unique back and forth because her concept of community was all on social. The way she described it to me was like, it's going to be an Instagram community. Where and sort of like my background was like, you're doing it on a third-party platform which you have no control over. Why not bring it into your own area and then focus on that? And we had this like really nice dialogue because what she saw was growth potential. Like I can expand because it's endless. Whereas I saw it as you need a handful of very specific people to help drive the community. It takes a little bit longer, but you get passionate people behind you in the business, and they understand, and that's how they bring more people in. We never got to like a resolution on which path is better. But I think that concept of community, it's just like trying to bring in people who have a like-minded focus on what you're delivering, but at the same time are willing to go above and beyond to either take your message and share with more folks, or are willing to like participate in things that a traditional customer might not. And I think identifying those, and a lot of brands don't do it, identifying those are the sort of like key to elevating that marketing experience. As a marketers, we often hear word of mouth is the best type of marketing. Yeah, it is, because there's this level of trust. You can use community to kind of build that trust, and then find those like folks who are actually going to go out and bring more people in because their voice matters a lot. So like the Fiverr example is great because it was in person, but I see a lot of what we're doing now at CrowdRiff to be like a hybrid version of that. So when I started, we actually had a digital community. It was closed off to our customers. It wasn't on Slack. It was like our own native proprietary solution. And while it fostered a lot of discussions, it required a lot of energy from us. Like, we had to constantly engage our customers. We had to create content for it. And the way I sort of like approach it is like, if we stopped doing anything there, how much would it actually hurt the business? Would it make a difference? And we found that it does have an impact. However, we were also running events. We had an annual event where those same customers were attending. And so my mind immediately went to like, how do we bridge the two together? So we do more at these events where it's not just a event and conference where you're learning, but you have all these outside things you can do. Like, we go out in the evening, we go visit a city, we learn about the neighborhood, and we build that bridge together, versus a digital community, which is always going to be, you drop a note or you drop a link and everyone's having a discussion. And we're moving in that direction where I personally prefer to have more face-to-face time. I think there's a lot of value in engaging folks that way. However, we're doing more of that in person, and then breaking out and doing more email, doing more social, more DMs and one-to-one engagements that way. So all that to say, like, I think there's like a hybrid version that could work really well. I don't think there's like one particular place where you have to build a community. It can be in different areas. But personally, the face-to-face engagement just helps drive everything else in a much more efficient way. Like, you can meet someone digitally, you can have those discussions, but when you spend time with them outside of that digital space, you start to like relate to who they are, why they do it, and how they can actually help you. And then it's easier to bring them into a digital space to be able to do more of that.
Yeah, these conferences definitely have to undergo some sort of format change. Like, it's no longer about people standing on stage and giving some presentation off slides anymore, right? Me and my co-founders, we went to a conference called Spring that Pep Laya hosted. He was from CXL. It was like his company Winter hosting it, and the speakers being on stage probably took up a fifth of the time. The rest of the time were all breakout sessions of us getting into smaller groups, having discussions, and honestly, he started serving beer at 9 a.m., so that probably helped get everyone a bit more open to chatting. But it was a lot more focused on, hey, how are we getting people to connect, rather than just having people in the same space but not talking to each other. You mentioned something really interesting just now of doing things together at the conference, right? Going to places. Like, how are you thinking about those events moving forward? It sounds pretty unique.
Yeah, so last year at the CrowdRiff conference, it's called C. Last year was in Toronto, and the team did a fantastic job of actually trying to bring all of our attendees into the local environment. So we went to this, I forget the name. I don't think they're there anymore. It's basically like a marketplace. It's an outdoor marketplace, okay. And has like an indoor area, and there's like drinks and all types of food, and we kind of just put everyone there. And the idea was to, if we're going to go to a conference, you want to experience a little bit of what's happening in the local environment. At the same time, like, you want it to be fun. Like, no one wants to walk around downtown by themselves or in a small group. So we kind of brought everyone together, and there was amazing feedback from all the attendees. Like, we want to do more of that. And so this year, our conference in September, we're in Denver, and we're doing like a graffiti tour. We're taking people out to like bars. We're doing like little breakout sessions, so everyone has a chance to experience what actual Denver is like. So the conference itself is great. You're going to learn, but you're going to spend time with people. And whenever we get feedback, it's always that. It's like, I want to spend more time with someone. So we're definitely doing more of that. And it's funny you mentioned conferences. Like, I just came back from Destination International in Dallas, and I'd been to one last year, and I had a very similar feeling going in this year, which was, it's so big. that I don't even know where to start, right? I go to the sessions, I listen to what people are saying, but it's hard to like build that relationship at these conferences because they're just gigantic. And even like the evening stuff that's planned, people already have their cliques. Our conferences, we're trying to, I mean, everyone wants a sizable event business, but we realize like one, we only have a set number of customers. If we can bring them all in and they engage with each other, awesome. But we realize like too many people just limits the amount of things you can do, especially outside of the conference. We want to maintain that because that's ultimately like the community side of what we feel like is going to be more valuable down the road.
Yeah, that really resonates with me. I mean, I spent a number of years at HubSpot, and they host Inbound every year. And last I heard, the number's probably higher now, but last I heard it was like 15,000 attendees. And I went to one maybe a year and a half ago, and I remember thinking, wow, like, the event's huge. That's great. That's great for HubSpot. I support it. It's a great company. But I don't know where to start. Like, it feels like, strangely enough, it feels hard to talk to people because it's such a big event versus when I was at the spring conference, it was, I think, 200 people, and Pep literally handpicked groups. He was like, oh, like, this is what this person's into. They're going to like this person. They're going to want to talk about this thing. Like, it felt like there was a lot of curating going on versus the bigger conferences. It's kind of a mixed bag of like whether you're going to meet someone who you'll like jive with and have the same interests with.
Yeah, I've seen that, on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. That's been sort of like the shift in a lot of these events, or they are smaller and intimate. I think part of what marketers and sales folks, anyone in sort of that space, they just want to understand who that other person is because we've been away from it for so long. Yeah. In a couple of years that might change, but I think for now, these like smaller, more intimate events are really starting to like resonate. And the few that I've attended, I walk away with a better understanding of why someone may not buy our product, or when is the right time to come back to them because they're willing to have that conversation with me. And just getting to know someone's like entire profile makes a huge difference when I consider like, all right, I don't want to bother this person because they have a life outside of work, because I know this. But when you're at the 15,000 or 2,000 people conference, you have no idea who these people are. All you're looking at is numbers and what jobs they do because I just need them to like sign something. So I think that matters a lot, and I hope that continues over the next couple of years because it's one of the few ways that you can start to like build that network, but in a way that feels sustainable.
Yeah, it's almost like we're gonna move away from this more like one-to-many type of marketing and just go more like face-to-face. Like, who knows? Maybe like door-to-door sales is gonna come back because people miss the face-to-face interaction so much. I
mean, I get them now. Like, so I live in Westchester, like right outside the city, and you get a lot of like these companies moving in. Like they're not like huge tech companies or anything, but I've seen more face-to-face doorbells, people like pitching me stuff than I've ever thought possible. And I think part of it is there's this idea like, all right, well, this community of the folks who live here are probably working from home, which makes sense. I want to talk to them. Let's try a different method. And in one instance, it did work. Like I did talk to the person. I considered it. I didn't go with them, but I bought that same solution from someone else, right? The idea of like someone coming in and ringing a doorbell and actually having a conversation, like that interaction made me think twice about like, oh man, like this person spent all this time with me. Like they're really pitching it hard. I took a card and I didn't go with them, but at least I started to think about what I could do with that type of solution, right? So yeah, it's happened to me a few times already, and it's not great, but because like in some cases like it's younger kids or like when I say kids, I mean like people like in their 20s like doing this and they don't have a ton of experience.
Out of college, yeah.
Yeah, but to your point, like I think that could come back in a way that makes sense, especially knowing that your audience is actually working from home and they're not always going to be in an office.
Yeah, that I I was making a joke, but it sounds like it's actually coming back.
It's happened, so I'll be the first one to attest to that. And I can always like go deeper into exactly what I bought, but maybe for another time.
Tell us more about that. What
all right.
Now
I'll tell you.
Like, did you just stand at the door and like, did you step outside and talk to him? Did you invite the person in? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, so I, when it comes to like personal space, I'm very protective of that. So it's like someone who rings my doorbell. Like, I've got the typical like Nest cameras. I make sure I know who it is. In this instance, it was actually someone pitching solar panels. And in the town I live in, like they're pushing it hard, obviously for environmental reasons, but also just like energy sustainability, that kind of stuff. And the guy did a fantastic job of pitching the service, but there were a couple questions I had he couldn't answer, and I kind of just walked away. It's like, I would consider it, but this is not the right person and the brand. I did go with another brand, and I did end up getting solar panels, but I wouldn't have thought about it as much had that person not knocked on our door.
So you weren't even really actively looking for...
We weren't actively looking, and I've seen signs around town like that was a thing that's happening, but when I had that conversation, it kind of, you see all the values, right? It's like, these are the things you can do. Like he was like, I could see your energy bill. I'll tell you what it is. Like, I don't want to give you all that information. But I think just like even using an example, like, hey, one of your neighbors got it and they love it. You can go talk to them. And I was like, okay, well, he clearly knows my neighbor and like had already done this work, right? But even just like, it was a 10-minute conversation. I stepped out, like we were just walking back and forth in the driveway. But I picked up so much from that discussion that if he had called me or sent me an email, none of that happens.
All right. Well, I'm curious if we're ever gonna. I live in a condo building. So far, I don't think people can get directly to my door because there's a front door, but we'll see. So I want to zoom out and go back to your role at CrowdRiff. So what are you focused on now? I think you've been there. Have you been there for about almost a year now?
A little over a year, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So what are you focused on there right now?
Yeah, so we, as with most, B2B SaaS businesses, like we're always looking for new customers. But I think the focus for me has been two particular things. One is we, as a brand, have been primarily known for user-generated content, especially for DMOs. So these are destination marketers who promote a specific destination. You've probably got emails from them. You've seen them when you travel. I love New York campaigns. Like there's a dedicated group that is responsible for building those types of campaigns, and so we work with a lot of them across North America and Europe as well. So the focus for me this year is how do we like move away from this idea that we are only UGC. We are not UGC anymore, and most of our customers and even the broader market just assumes CrowdRiff equals UGC. And so we're working on a brand campaign to like help us, at least help the market understand that that is not the only thing we offer. We've got a number of different solutions to help them market their particular destination. And then the other part of what we're trying to do this year is we are emphasizing a greater focus on trying to expand like our own marketing capabilities. And what I mean by that is like we as a business are selling a solution. Like we sell short form video, we sell UGC, we sell editing solutions. But historically, we haven't done that ourselves. We haven't like sort of dog-footed our own product. And so this year, the other focus is on how do we leverage all the assets we have in our own product to be able to like market our own solutions. Again, like you'd think like that's an easy win for most companies, but it's actually a lot harder because you have your own system to be able to sell, but you don't have those same systems built to be able to utilize it. And so that's a big focus for us, like sort of like dog-food our own product even more and market it to these destination marketers who want to know how to use it properly. And so those have been like two big areas of focus, and I want to spend more time over the next couple of quarters like diving into each one and just understand like how we made that shift after we do some of this campaign on like this idea that we're no longer just UGC.
Yeah. Why the move away from that idea of like UGC?
Yeah, because now we actually have multiple solutions. When I first joined, UGC was our biggest product. We've had like DAM and a couple of other solutions, but now we've got a creator solution which connects destination marketers with local creators who can create a lot of video assets, especially like short form video assets for social media, their website. We've got an editing solution that ties in really nicely with all of the content that you'll be editing, and then you're able to like push it out onto different channels. Like those two things weren't a big part of our portfolio when I joined last year, and they are now. And I think when you look at the holistic view of all the things we're able to do for a marketer now versus last year, just thinking of us as a UGC solution limits what's possible for those destination marketers. And so I think like as a business, we have more to offer, and so we want the market and our customers to understand that. But more importantly, I think internally we are excited about sort of the direction, the path of the business, and we want to be able to talk about it and let the world know that we're not just one solution anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, what you're saying to me sounds like a change in positioning and messaging, which to me rings the like product marketing alarms. The thing that catches my ear is you're calling like a brand campaign. So I'd love to hear, what does it look like to run a brand campaign to push out this change in positioning and messaging? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned product marketing a bit because we've been working very collaboratively with the product team to get us there. So this isn't a situation where the product team just launches something and like, hey, we have to figure out how to actually market this. This has been a collaborative effort from the get-go. Like, we made a decision that we will work on this particular initiative, and then there's a messaging exercise that comes out of that. Tactically, without getting into all the details, it's a combination of like actually understanding, which one of our customers uses all of our solutions, which solutions do we want to focus on the most. And so the CrowdRiff Creator solution, we feel, is the best sort of description of where we're headed as a business. And so we hone in on that, but it starts with talking to our customers, getting those case studies, documenting all of it, and then building an entire marketing solution around how are our customers using it, why are they using it. So it doesn't feel like it's one solution. They're using multiple solutions to either promote their destinations or drive more awareness for a particular thing within their destination. So you'll see a combination of like really robust videos, which is a big focus for us as well. You'll see social playing a bigger role there, where you'll see press releases, like typical stuff you'll see for a brand campaign. But I think at the heart of it all is there is a subset of our customers who have been using our solutions behind the scenes, and they've done a fantastic job utilizing it. So we want to bring that to life. But yeah, so it's like, if you think about it in terms of like the brand campaign, it's a messaging exercise, it's shifting the perception, but at the same time, we're not moving away from destination marketers, right? Mm-hmm. So the perception is really within that market, which I think works well for us. If we were to go into a different vertical or a different market, then we're looking at a completely different way to approach that. But because it's still within the DMO space, within travel, making that shift for us should be a little bit easier. And I say should because who the heck knows? But we're very confident in the approach that our destination marketers already know us, they like our solutions, and when we introduce another one, they'll get excited about that as well. And it doesn't have to move too far away from how they typically engage with us.
Yeah. So I want to zoom out and kind of look at the process by which you found these things to focus on. As like a marketing leader, you kind of come in, and depending on how mature the marketing team is, there might already be stuff in place, or you might be building from scratch, but there's kind of a limited number or unlimited number of things that you could be spending your time on. How do you decide where you spend your time, whether it be building the marketing programs or building a team? Like, how do you figure out your prioritization?
Yeah, so one of the things that we, being like a startup, there's always going to be a number of different things to focus on. Sometimes, personally, I've gotten into projects where I'm just like, man, this sounds so exciting. I want to do it because I think it's cool. But one of the things we often look at, especially at CrowdRiff, is what's actually driving not just like business value, but where are we going to be 6, 12 months from now if we were to make this decision? So looking ahead a bit has helped us understand which sort of marketing areas to focus on. The other thing was, I came into this team and it was already established. There were 12 people on the team, and we didn't have a clear sort of like KPI as a group to go after. And we weren't sure, what's going to have the biggest impact. How are we helping the sales team? How are we helping the product team? And so we looked at all our different options and then honed in on one particular metric and said, if we do this really well, we'll be successful as a team, but we'll also help each one of these different areas. And so to get back to your question, like, what are we focusing on? How do we do it? I think it's like understanding, like, we have a North Star now. Everything we do has to revolve around that. So we ask those questions, like, is it going to drive this particular metric? If not, what is the next layer below that? And if we can't answer those questions, we move on to the next solution. And so initially when I started, it was really to help the team understand how to build that North Star and like, what do we go after? And then everything below that, for the DG campaigns, the brand, that all sort of like follows that trajectory. And that sort of North Star also aligns really well with the sales team, with the product team, right? So my job early on was like sort of honing in on one thing, and then everything else sort of like follows after that. Now that sounds like a very typical like marketer thing. Like you come in, you solve a particular challenge, you look at the numbers, think, well, we got to grow, right? But the good thing about the sort of position I was in was, one, the team was already established. They had very specific roles to help drive any metric. And so when we finally decided on what our core KPI was, it was really easy because everyone was adaptable. Everyone had roles. It's like, okay, well, I'm not going to be focusing on that. I'm going to drive this particular thing. So that made it really easy for me. I didn't have to do what many marketing leaders do. Is they come in and they bring their own teams, or they let a bunch of people go, and then you bring in other folks. Like there was none of that here, which is really nice and reassuring. And on all the campaign stuff now that we're about to launch, that all culminated from steps we've taken over the last year. It's like get the KPI, get the metrics down, focus on the area that we want to grow. That's worked. And then, okay, what do we need to do next to elevate our brand, elevate these new solutions we have? And so that's where we're at right now. But a lot of those foundational things had to be established in order to get the team excited about where we are today. So I've been like very lucky and fortunate that the team already had direction in terms of the roles and responsibilities. So my job was just to like make sure that our focus shift from one thing to another and do it in a way that made sense.
Yeah, thanks for walking us through the whole process. The thing that I've learned to appreciate a lot more throughout my career is as I've gotten more seniors, you come in and the timeline you're looking at is not having impact in the next 30, 60, 90 days, though like you want to have some impact, but the real game is like at least 2 years. So like spend the first year getting these things in place, and then like the next year is really like executing on the true like big things that you want to do, it sounds like. And to me, that sounds like a lot of work, at least like in what you're trying to do. I know that you're also a parent, and I admire whenever I meet someone and they're like super high caliber, and I'm like, wait, you're also a parent? How are you doing both things? Like, what does your day-to-day look like with that in mind, like having a family and kids and so on?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is like I've been on all these like different companies over the years, and personally, like I was never able to relate to another parent. There was and I'll share the story because I think it was really relevant. I think about it often. When I was at Shutterstock, we had a marketing leader there, and she would leave every day at a certain time to go pick up her kid. And there are certain things that you just want approvals on, and she wasn't there. And a lot of us took it personal. It's like, why is she doing this? Like, why can't she just figure it out? And until you're on the other end of it, you have no idea, what that feeling is like, because we didn't realize that she was nervous every single day to make sure that she was getting things done on time. She had someone, a person to pick up every single day. Like, a lot of these things that we just don't factor in because you're not in that situation. And even when I first became a parent, I was at a different company, and a lot of what I wanted to do as a marketer, I just couldn't get done because I had other responsibilities. So I struggled a lot early on to understand like my role as a parent, but also role as a parent, as a partner to help my wife, but also like I have a job to do. And there were times when I was like, I don't even know where to start. And so when that first happened, it was very hard, and and honestly, like it led to like performance issues at work. It led to trying to figure out how to make things happen at home. I was also commuting, so you can imagine, going into an office every single day. Like that was also very challenging. Funny enough, like, and I'm very grateful for this. What's happened is like the pandemic, in some crazy way, has made it a little bit easier. I don't have to go into an office anymore, and I'm very fortunate that CrowdRiff as a company went remote. So because I'm the only U.S. hire, it made it a little bit easier for them to hire me, and for me to like not have to worry about commuting into an office. So the company itself, it's two co-founders who are also parents, which makes it easier. They understand the challenges of being a parent, knowing that the schedules matter. I'd say on a leadership team, just off the top of my head, with the exception of one person, everyone's a parent. And so that makes it really easy for the company to understand, okay, they have responsibilities at home, and there's a cutoff. Like, you can find me at 5:30, I'll respond, but I'll let you know that, hey, I'll come back later on tonight to answer the rest of those questions. And we sort of established that as a business. So for me, knowing that coming into the business, it was very reassuring. Like I knew that I could be a parent at home, do all the things I need to do as a parent, and at the same time, do my job in a very functional and supportive way, where if I can't get to something, there's an understanding that I will get back to it. So my typical day, I drop off both my kids at school. Now they're in camp. And I come back. I usually take a walk before like 9 o'clock. So I come home in time for like a 20-minute walk. I try to get a mile in every day. Otherwise, my brain is just cluttered with kid stuff.
Yep.
I start the day, and then my wife does the pickup. So I have all the way till the end of the day just to do work. Typically, I'd say 4:30 is when I log off, spend time with them. We have dinner, and then I'll do a check-in later in the evening. So most days I log back on 8, 9 o'clock, an hour, sometimes 2 hours, depending on how much we have left to do. But that flexibility allows me to do the things I always wanted to do, which was like be a parent, fully be a parent, but also do work in the way that matters. But the first time I became a parent, it was really hard. And I think that's one thing that most companies don't understand. It's like from the parent side, like we do want to do the best job at work and at home. But without understanding and without having some level of give from an employer point of view, it's really hard to do both well. And so I'm grateful that we have a company and a leadership team that gets it, but I know not everyone is in that situation. So it's a little bit easier for me with all that said. But the days get packed and you're constantly trying to move from one thing to another. But people get it and they understand. And like having leaders who are also parents help a lot.
Yeah, you can feel free to not answer this question if you're not comfortable, but if you're open to sharing, what was it like when you first became a parent? It was like, you said it was tough at work, there were some performance issues. Like, what did you have to figure out yourself in order to work through that period?
Yeah, so I've always wanted to be a parent. I always envisioned what it would be like to be a parent and have a job. At the same time, like, what your partner goes through is completely different than what I went through, right? Yeah. So my wife had to deal with delivering the baby and also had a job too, right? So there's aspects of that. I think the toughest challenge for me was I wanted to be at home and spend as much time as I possibly could, but commuting 30, 40 minutes made that tough early in the morning, like leaving. There are situations where you've got doctor appointments, you've got some random stuff happening. The kid might be sick and you can't just leave. You want to, you can't just leave. So you got to make sure somebody else knows, like, hey, this is happening, I got to go. So it was a combination of like making sure I was supportive with supporting my wife with everything that she's going through, but also this mind shift of like my schedule is completely different. I've heard this a few times and I often tell people this, like my mornings used to be like, I would get up, I'd take a shower, I'd make my coffee, I would sit, I'd read the news. And then I'd commute into work, I'd walk into work, whatever the case was. I don't even shower in the morning anymore. Like, it's just like gone. I don't have time for that anymore. I used to, you've seen this before, like I collect sneakers, I used to do all this stuff. I used to pick out what I wanted to wear in the morning. It's like, I'm going to pick this sneaker with that outfit. Yeah. I don't even get a chance to do that anymore. So I think like the shift in terms of like responsibilities and what you need to do for the rest of the day, that was like the hardest part. It's like, I knew I had to be in two places at once and I didn't know how to balance the two. And I often prioritize home versus work. And so when I mentioned some of the performance thing, it was like, hey, at 4 o'clock, I got to be home because my wife also has to get off of work. And then we have to make sure that we're both home. And that was our choice. Like, we wanted to be there from the beginning. We didn't want to rely on just one person. And not everyone gets to make that choice. So you kind of offset one with the other. Luckily, it's a different scenario now. But at that time, and I'm sure a lot of parents, when they become first-time parents, deal with this, like, you want to be supportive, but at the same time, like, there is another job to do that's not taking care of a child.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So this might tie into the next thing I want to ask you about, like a bit more about your background. But for me, like, I don't have kids yet. I would love to be a parent. I want 2 daughters in the future, very specifically 2 daughters. And I think about the things I'm concerned about being a future parent and like kind of what you're talking about right now. And I think about my parents who like fled a genocide from Cambodia, and I'm like, what were they thinking about when they were having kids? Like, very different types of concerns, like starting off like lower income work and all of that stuff.
Survival at that point, right?
It's survival, right? You just do what you got to do. And I bring this up because in my research, when you like learning about your background, my understanding is you were born in a village in Bangladesh. You got lucky. Your dad hit the OP1 visa lottery in 1990, right? That's what brought you and your family to New York City. And for the listeners, my research tells me that less than 1 out of every 200 applicants get that visa. So that's like 0.5% acceptance rate, which is crazy to think about. And I see this guy in front of me, like on camera, of course, but I'm like, wow, come a long way, man. I don't know what the question is, but like, would love to hear like your reflection on the contrast of just how much of a difference like these decisions and events happen.
Yeah, I mean, like to your point about being a parent, very similar. Like my parents came here, and it was literally just about survival. It was nothing else. Like we have these kids, we have to make sure like they just every day something gets better and better, right? I think there was a part of me early on that was very hesitant to talk about this stuff. You know, growing up in New York City in middle school, high school, I never actively talked about it. Part of it was I grew up in communities where it was almost like shameful to talk about the fact that your parents were poor. It's just like, even though like I didn't realize at the time, everyone around me was in a similar situation. Like I grew up with immigrants, like they all struggle in different ways. But until you see it, you don't realize like they're also going through the same thing. So, you know, middle school, high school, even elementary school, it's like, oh man, I can't show that side of me. But as I got a little bit older and I realized, like, again, people around me were dealing with the same things, it was easier to open up. And just going through that experience of coming to this country and realizing that it is like one of the luckiest things possible, it changes like how you approach work, it changes how you approach people, it changes like how you think about your own success. I'm at a place where actually between like myself and my younger siblings, like we're at a place where my parents could have never imagined any of this possible. Like we've all got careers, we have kids, you know. My brother just texted and said he just signed a lease on a new place. Like he bought an apartment. Like my parents could have never thought about all of their kids having their own places. Like it just wouldn't have been possible. And so I think the way we approach others, like what I've gone through, like really helps shape how we think about people and their own journeys. And I think it makes us easier to relate to someone. It's like not everyone has the same story. Everyone has a different story on how they got there. So whenever I talk about it, people are like, oh my God, you did all of this to get here. Like, how does it feel? Like, what did your parents do? I'm like, my parents were just poor, man. Like, it's just, that's just how it was. And he operated a couple of food carts and I helped him in the morning. We like pushed it in the morning at 6 a.m. to go to a spot on West 4th. That's just like what you did to get by. You know, I don't have to do that, luckily. And sometimes I worry like my kids will never understand what it's like to kind of go through that journey, right? But when I reflect on it, it's shaped like how I approach people and how I think about success. And personally, like I've surpassed all of that and I'm grateful for all of it, but those like reminders pop up every here and there. And so I read like that piece you mentioned, like I go back to it often because it's a reminder of like how things could have changed drastically. You know, for all I know, I could have still been doing the same thing my dad did, which was farming in like a tiny little village that no one knows or cares about. Yeah,
I reflect on similar things, like not just my parents' decisions, but even mine. Like I know a lot of folks growing up who ended up in gangs and went to jail and all that. I'm like, how did these micro decisions or whatever end up in me getting to work in tech and like having all the success? Like, damn, like if that's not luck, I don't know what else to call it. Like, I can't say I was like super smart or like very intelligent. I didn't take school seriously or anything growing up. It's always interesting. I'm curious if this resonates with you, and maybe it's a little too personal. Maybe the audience doesn't care, but one thing I've noticed, so my younger sister just had a daughter who turned 2, and seeing my parents be grandparents is so different compared to the parents I saw growing up. Because with me, they were always stressed out. They were both working. There were like fights. And when I see them with my niece, I'm like, oh my God, you're just like playing and you're truly happy and you get to enjoy this experience of being a grandparent. Like, I'm sure with your parents, it must be amazing for them to get to see your kids. And
yeah, it's a very similar experience. They spoil the heck out of my kids. My 2 sisters have young kids now too, and same thing. Like my parents have evolved a lot since when they first came here. I think combination of my kids are okay, like they'll be just fine, like in that reassurance, like that they don't have to worry about that. But more importantly, like they've just adapted to things that they wouldn't have if we were still very young. So they realized like, okay, like I can do these things on my own. I'm sure you can relate to this. Like we had to because we translated for my parents, we have to go everywhere. So I would miss school to go to doctor's appointments. So we translate for my mom's doctor's appointment. It got to a point where some of our elementary school teachers were like, what the heck is going on in this home? Like, every other week you're not here, and what are you doing? And so when we start to explain, okay, these are all the things that we have to actually help our parents just to get by on a regular basis, it finally connected. And funny enough, like my elementary school, Lower East Side, lots of immigrants, like, I still stay in touch with a number of my teachers because they were so instrumental in like helping us grow. My parents, like just like yours, like they were constantly working. Like my dad would come home late at night, like exhausted, and I would help him in the morning. But in the evenings, like I can't leave school to go help him. Like he just doesn't make sense. So our teachers played a bigger role in shaping like how we think about the world. I still like see them once a year. Some of them come to our house. Like they know my kids. Like I just kept that going because they played such a big role. And I think that only happens because there's perspective from everything like my parents had gone to. Like I want to be able to build those relationships. I want to continue that relationship. And so hopefully like my kids as they grow up, like look at my teachers as an extension of the family and less about an educator. But again, like I have so many friends who never go back to the elementary school, never go back to the high school because they don't see that as like a big part of growing up. It's just like another step along the way. Whereas like we came from a place where education was like my dad never finished elementary school, like education was a big thing. And so the teachers just built that foundation for us. And it's just like amazing to me when I do spend time with them and they talk about when I was a kid. And like my wife hears these stories and she's like laughs hysterically all the time. And I think that also goes back to your point about just like understanding what my parents have gone through and like perspective changes and the decisions we make along the way helps us understand the world a little bit differently. And I sort of like try to apply a lot of that to work situations. And I've been very open about like not only my journey, but also how people can communicate with me within my own team. It's like, I am not there to tell you what to do. Like I believe everyone is good at what they do to a certain extent. I'm here to help you fill in the rest of that gap. So if you can't get to that extra 20%, like I'm here to help you do that. And so when you start to open up a little bit like that with people, all of a sudden the way they work with you changes. They're willing to come to you with challenges and problems and want to solve those things with you together versus what I grew up with at work was like you didn't say anything because you were afraid you might get fired, or you kept things to yourself because if you say too much, somebody might look at you and it's like, that person talks too much. Like that sort of like shift has happened as a generation. But also leaders like myself and some of the managers I've had in the past, very open about solving challenges together. And so I think a lot of it stemmed from my early days of understanding, like if I want to do better, I need to like rely on people around me. And the people around me at the time just happened to be my teachers. And they really helped shape all the things that I've learned, but also like taking chances and evolving as a person.
I really appreciate you sharing all that. That's pretty personal, and I love that you like share some of that with your team and kind of set expectations there. And I know we're kind of coming up on time, and I think that's a great place to start wrapping up and shifting gears a little bit. You up for some rapid fire closing questions?
Sure. All
right, let's do it. So, what's one opinion you have about business you think people would disagree with?
So I'll give you a specific example for like social. I hear often that social can't be a driver for growth in e-commerce. Like I hear it all the time. It's like social is just like it's a fun place where you see memes and videos, but it's not a core driver of business. It could just be the people I'm talking to, but most people don't think about like how do we use what's happening around us in these like videos and content as a way to drive sustainable growth. That is something I have to constantly educate, especially folks who are a little bit older than me. It's like, this is just for kids. It doesn't work, but it does. And once they see it, it opens up. Like, oh my God, this is possible.
Yeah, I'm starting to see that with some of the software companies I've sort of advised on. They're like, we got a bunch of growth from someone posting a TikTok video. I'm like, it sounds like a fluke, but seems like it keeps happening. So keep at it.
Exactly. Yeah, there was a time when if you thought about Google and how much that drives business objectives, nobody would have taken it seriously. If you go back to the time when search ads were around. People are like, there's no way. You got to do print. You got to do all these like brand campaigns. You got to do TV, right? We've come so far that we're still being skeptical of these channels that are actual growth drivers. And yeah, Facebook exists and a lot of businesses use them, but it's the consumer who still doesn't understand like the power of a TikTok video or Reels and how much that actually impacts their day-to-day decision making.
Yeah. All right. What is one impactful piece of advice that you've been given?
I'll go back to my earlier example at Shutterstock. That CEO specifically telling me like, not everyone knows what you do. So it's your job to make sure they know what you do and that they can help you do it better. So I think that's really important. I try to get that across to as many people as possible. Is people will assume what you do, but if you really want them to get a better understanding of what you do, you need to tell them.
Yeah, I'm writing that down as something to remind my team of as well. Thanks for that. What's one book you'd recommend more people read?
Man, I've been reading a lot of fiction lately. Okay, so I'm gonna forget the exact name, but there's David and Goliath from Malcolm Gladwell. I think that's an easy one because people love Gladwell. But there's a couple of chapters in there that so there's a specific story about David and Goliath and what the perception was about why David beat Goliath, but it's the little details in there, right? It's like you take advantage of the skills that you're good at versus what people assume is a skill set that you might be, disadvantage, exactly. So I think like, again, from the outset, when you hear that story, like, yeah, that happened because David was great or he just had gumption and he got that done. It wasn't. It was like these tiny little details because he was shorter and genetics played a role in like how that works, right? So the reason why I love that book is because there are some really great stories about how as an individual, you can start to leverage like your best qualities to do something better. There was also another story about, I think like there was a number of airline crashes, specifically Korean airlines, and they were crashing for a reason and no one could figure out why. Turns out the airline industry didn't have a sort of like standard way of communicating. They all spoke their own language. And so guess what? When you're talking to someone in Korean versus someone in English and they're not communicating, yeah, things happen, right? Now everyone speaks English, right? So that's required across the airline industry. So again, going back to like how do we apply that to work? Communication and being able to communicate in an effective way. So I love that book because I took it as ways to better like the things that I can do to make my own work better, and then how do I relate that back to the team? But it sounds like an easy answer, but when you look at the details of that of those stories, there are so many different places you can apply each one of those details.
What about fiction?
Man, fiction. Okay. So I'm like staring at the book collection back there. Yeah, I don't have anything off the top. Like the stuff that I've been reading are just like post-COVID stories. I'm like trying to make sense of all of it. It's just like real human stories. Like I spend a lot of time trying to read stories about like why people think about things in a certain way. So I forget the exact name of the book, but this was a COVID story with this lady who she was in a coma due to COVID, and then she imagined herself to be in another country, meeting this entire new family and having a completely different relationship. And then she woke up from it, and her life just changed because the experience she had while she was in the coma was what she actually wanted in life, and what she had before she got COVID and got into the coma was not what she wanted anymore. Anyway, it's a. Wow, I thought it was fascinating.
I haven't heard.
I thought it was just like a fascinating take because your subconscious is telling you what you're missing out on in this way. And anyway, I'll try to find the book, but it was an interesting read.
It's great to hear she got that experience without even using psychedelics.
Yeah, true.
All right, last question here is where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, so I do have a Twitter account. I'm not super active on it. I talk about mostly sports, specifically the Golden State Warriors. I'm a huge Steph Curry fan, growing up playing sports. LinkedIn is probably the best place. So you can find me. My full name is Kash Miah, so Kashem. LinkedIn would be the best place. Instagram as well. But if you want to talk to me about work stuff, LinkedIn is where it's at. If you follow me on Twitter, great. You'll hear mostly about sports stuff, sports and sneakers.
Are you seeing these videos of Steph Curry golfing?
Yeah, I think so. Going back to my point about details and skill sets, right? I think the reason why if you think about basketball and what he does to golf, it's hand-eye coordination and the like little tweaks. And so it makes sense that someone like him, who has amazing hand-eye coordination as a basketball, as a three-point shooter, would translate to golf, right? So all of that stuff comes full circle when you think about like what are you really good at and how can you apply it to other things.
It makes sense. It's just still so wild to watch those videos and be like, "There's no way this is fake, right?"
It's crazy. Like I spend a lot of time.
One shot.
I spend so much time with my son, and I've seen like other kids around the neighborhood who all want to be Steph Curry, and it's because of like how much of an impact he's had on young kids. But it's so realistic. Like it's doable, right? So when you think about like what he's doing on the golf course, I bet your kids are also thinking like, "Oh, that's possible," because this guy's doing it in such a like easy way. Where someone like Tiger Woods, like huge, they're jacked, and there's like skill set that you're not really quite sure because he's so big. Whereas like you see Steph Curry do it on the basketball court, he's doing it in other sports. Maybe it's also possible for me as well.
We're going to see so many more hole-in-ones in golf over the next couple of years.
For sure, yeah.
All right. Well, I know we're running out of time here, so Kash, it was a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for making the time.
No, thank you for the time, David. I appreciate you following up a few times. I know I didn't get back to you promptly a few times.
I'm glad we made it happen. All right, take care.
Thank you.